Hey everyone, it's me, Robbie Balilan here from Unique Photo, and today is going to be a really cool day. We have Mark Cruz, is Nikon Senior Manager for mirrorless cameras over there in Nikon, so he's the perfect guy to talk to about the Nikon Z6 Mark II and the Z7 Mark II, which was just recently released. Uh, and welcome over here, Mark. How's everything going?
Fantastic. First, I'm going to do, I don't mean to do this because you're the host, but I got to correct you on the names. It's Z72, Z62. We don't put the mark in there.
Oh, okay,
It's
okay,
all
I'm
good.
sorry. That sounds good. Learning the hard
It's all
way,
good. It's all good.
live.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Z7 to Z6 2. Awesome. Well, there's still
Yeah. Yeah.
both great cameras, and that 2 is pretty significant as well. But yeah, I just remember that you were on the release video. I was watching Sharmi and Joe McNally over here. They're great friends of Unique Photo, so it was really cool to see them on that release and seeing what experience they're having over the camera. And you were the ones answering all the technical aspects, everything that was happening. So that's why we're super happy to have you here with us. And thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Yeah, it's good that you're doing this because we're still about a month away from the sales start date of the Z6 II and about a couple of months till the Z7 II. So that's being released in December for the 7 II. 6 II is coming in November. So this is a good way for people to get answers to their questions before they actually hit the market. So let's do this.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. We had a bunch of questions here sent in to us. So we're just going to be running off of that. But if you guys have any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the chat. We'll be more than happy to answer them. And the Z6, the original Z6, that one won a EISA 2019 award, and that was like the best all-arounder camera. So it's really cool or exciting to see what could be improved upon a camera that's with such a high accolade. So, like, can you tell us or run us through some of the? I mean, I know the Z6 II and the Z7 II share a lot of features together. Can you run us through like some of the things that they share in common?
Yeah, for people that are new to the Nikon system and they're looking at our mirrorless line for the first time, at this point, you know, when we launch these cameras, we'll eventually have 6 cameras in the lineup. So the original Z6 and Z7 is actually not going away. Those will be in the lineup going forward, along with the Z6 II and the Z7 II, which are successors to the 6 and 7. We also have a Z5, which is an entry point into the full frame format, and a Z50, which is the DX version. But and on the whole spectrum, the Z6 II and the Z7 II are kind of at the top. But the main differentiators between those two cameras are the sensors. So the megapixel on the Z6 II is 24.5 megapixels, whereas the Z7 II is 45.7 megapixels. That's the huge resolution difference between the two. You're almost getting medium format type of resolution with the Z7 II as well as the Z7. The ISO ranges are different between the two as well. So you have, on the case of the Z6 II, 100 to 51,200, expandable up to 200,000 ISO. And with the Z7 II, it starts at a lower ISO at 64. So this is really designed towards studio photographers, landscape photographers, people that are shooting at low ISOs and want to maximize the image quality. And the resolution on the Z7 II is actually so high that we were able to remove the optical low pass filter, giving you a little bit more sharper images without the moire. So those are the key differences in terms of the sensor, resolution, ISO range, as well as focus points. So these cameras now use on-sensor phase detect autofocus points. There is about a 270, well, there's 273 on the Z6 II and there's 493 on the Z7 II. So they cover 90% of the frame on both of them, which is a huge departure for people that are using DSLRs. If you're coming from DSLR world, you're used to having the focus point clusters right in the middle of the frame. With our Z cameras, they cover 90% of the frame for freedom of composition. But with the Z7, you get more points for finer accuracy.
Absolutely. And the autofocusing is already great on it, the eye autofocus. And with the processor there's now 2, right? And in terms of the processor for the camera.
Yeah, let's talk about the improvements on the Generation 2. So among them are hardware improvements. So in Generation 1, we did a lot of software improvements through firmware updates. Now with Generation 2, we really needed to address the hardware upgrades. So one of the things we addressed was the buffer capacity, and we're using now CF Express cards in these natively. That has a really fast write speed, but we need to keep up with that write speed with faster ways to clear the buffer. So we put 2 X-Speed processors in the 2 version of these cameras. Both the 6 and the 7 have 2 dual X-Speed processors, which means the practicality of that is more than triple the buffer. So with the case of the Z7, you can get up, I think, up at 77 shots with the Z7 II now. That's more than triple of the first gen. With the Z6 II, you can get, I think, 124 raw shots in a row. That's 3.5 times the original version. So that's helped by the dual X-Speed processors as well as the frame rate. So the frame rate is up to 14 frames per second on the Z6 II, 10 frames per second on the Z7 II, and that's coming out of a camera that's doing 45 megapixels at 10 frames per second in continuous extended mode. A couple of the hardware differences too that we did is dual card slots. I know a lot of your customers are probably professionals. You yourself shoot weddings, right? Yeah. So I think we've heard from the wedding community, they needed dual card slots. From the moment we released the Z6 and Z7, they said it's a great camera. If it had this and this and this, you know, I would probably dive into it. But as a professional or shooting weddings and things like that, even though the XQD card was so good, the CF Express card is so good, they needed that peace of mind, and we gave it to them. So in both of the Z6 II and the Z7 II, we have dual card slots. First one is the CF Express. Second one is SD UHS-2 compatible. Third major hardware upgrade was the compatibility with a new battery grip, which I have on here right now. So I have it attached to the Z6 II. This is the MB N11. So when we released the Z6 and Z7 a couple of years ago, we had a battery pack for it. That was the MBN10. Mm-hmm. It was a hot swappable battery pack, but it didn't have a functional trigger on it, shutter release or aperture or shutter speed dials. This now has contacts inside of the body to communicate to the grip. So now we can actually have a functional grip as well as hot swappable battery in the front. So this grip is designed unlike any grip that we've ever come out with, in that you can replace the first battery closest to the door without interrupting the operation of the camera. So imagine if you're running a time lapse or a movie and you want to keep running it but change the battery, you can do that as long as there's another battery in the deeper portion of the grip here. You can run off that, interchange the front battery, and keep your operation going. So those are among the major hardware improvements.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, looking at the vertical grip with the 7200, it looks like it fits perfectly together. Right?
Well, that's one of the reasons we did it, is because of people that are using longer glass. We have now the 70-200 in our lineup. This is the native Z1, but people that are doing FTZ with super telephoto lenses, not only does the vertical grip give them more confidence when they're shooting vertically, they don't have to do this, but even if they're shooting in a portrait or horizontal landscape orientation, it's just a beefier grip that balances extended telephotos much better.
Absolutely. And like what you said about like wedding photographers needing like the dual SD or dual memory card, with the CF Express, is that going to be like backwards compatible with XQD?
Yes, so I mentioned CF Express and SD compatibility here, but the good news is if you've had a D4, D4S, D5, D500, any of those cameras that already have XQD, you can use your XQD cards in here as well. So it's both CF Express and XQD compatible. But the good news about CF Express is it's now more readily available than when we initially had XQD. I think we literally had one manufacturer out there. Now there are several manufacturers manufacturing CF Express, and for the price at the megabytes per second, it's up to I think 1,700 megabytes per second on some of these cards. You're getting dollar for dollar, megabyte or gigabyte for gigabyte, a better value with CF Express cards. They're almost priced around the same price as an equivalent XQD. So I would highly recommend people that get a Z6 II or Z7 II to get a CF Express card, because it's with those cards that we can realize the full potential of the buffer.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that was another thing about the buffer, the CF Express, it's just able to write so fast now. So thinking about like car photography during the racetrack and everything else, you just need that buffer to keep going up, especially with sports and everything else like that. For wedding photography, I don't feel like I really need that crazy fast shutter. I'm not going to use that 10 frames per second. So I was wondering, like, if I was to back up with the SD card simultaneously, would that affect the speed at all for in terms of the buffer rate? If I was doing,
yes, it would. Correct. Yeah, because the buffer, if you're doing, well, it depends what mode you're doing it in. There are 3 different modes that you can configure the dual card slot for when you're shooting stills. Number 1, the default out of the box is overflow, and that means it's going to shoot to the CF Express card first. If it gets full, then it starts writing to the SD card. Number 2 is backup mode. That means it's going to write to both cards at the same time redundantly, whatever file format you're using. And third is an option to write RAW to one card and JPEG to the second card, the SD card. Now, if you're shooting at a burst and you're doing backup to both cards, it will go to the lowest common denominator, essentially.
Oh, Mark? Let me see, 1 second.
And basically, you're going at the speed of the CF Express card.
Gotcha. I think it kind of froze in the middle of your explanation. I'm sorry about that. So I missed the part where you explained the 3 different modes, but you were explaining, I think, when it was starting to bottleneck for the SD card as it writes to the slower one.
Yeah, I think my internet connection needs dual X-speed processors as well to keep up with my speech. But basically, I was saying that the lowest common denominator is the SD card.
Right.
Even the fastest SD cards out there write at 300 megabytes per second. Those are the UHS-2s, and those are the most expensive cards on the market for SD. But with CF Express, you're at 1700 megabytes per second. If you write in backup mode, it's going to go to the lowest speed of the lowest card. So if you want to shoot fast, shoot to the CF Express card only.
There you go. Absolutely. And like with everything else, the processor just does so much for the camera, and I think that's really great. And let's see. We got a few other questions here. What can we expect for videographers out there, and what has improved for them?
Hey, great question. I'd love to tackle that right now. Both of these cameras in Gen 2 have marked improvements for video, namely the inclusion of 4K 60. Let's talk about that for a second. I said the Z7 II is going to be coming out in December. Out of the gates, that is going to have the option for 4K 60. This is a new feature that we did not have in Generation 1. We didn't have this combination of resolution and frame rate. A lot of people have been asking for that. We've been offering 1080 at 24, 30, 60, and even 120 frames per second. And we've had 4K at up to 30 frames per second, but people wanted or demanded that extra bit of frame rate. So we now have that in the Z7 II out of the gates. There will be a minor crop on it. It'll be a 93% of the frame. So it's almost FX, almost full frame. The Z6 II, on the other hand, starts shipping in November, but it won't be compatible with 4K 60 until we release a firmware upgrade early next year. So a couple of months after we release the Z6 II, we will have a firmware update that will enable 4K 60. Mind you, that 4K 60 will be in a DX crop.
That's awesome. Well, that's also going to include the that amazing autofocusing while it's happening for video as well, right?
That's right. I'm glad you brought that up. So other marked improvements for video are eye detect in video now. That's something we did not have in Gen 1. Eye detect was exclusively for stills in the Z6 and Z7. Right. We now have it for video in both the Z6 and Z7. And I will say another cool feature for video users out there that are used to using other cine lenses or other manufacturers where the manual focus ring twists in the opposite direction of Nikon lenses, we now have a feature in the Z6 II and Z7 II to reverse that direction so that you can overcome your muscle memory, essentially, and focus the direction that you're used to. So that's a nice feature that we've kind of a surprise Easter egg in there that we've listened to the video community and offered in both the Z6 II and Z7 II.
That's great. I mean, like with the autofocusing being continuous while you're recording video, I think that makes me more confident into like recording footage myself, you know, like you could just know that it's locking on to their face or anything like that. And that's the most integral part, especially if you're moving around with like, say, a gimbal. It just takes a lot of the work out of it. So it's a really great addition into that autofocusing system.
Hey, listen, if I didn't believe in it, I wouldn't be doing it. I'm doing it right now. I'm doing face detect on this camera right now. So I believe in it. I didn't even put it on manual focus. I have it on face detect right now.
There you go. And that's it. And it's been locked on ever since. So that's great.
Hey, listen, and I'm also living by the sword and dying by the sword. I have it on a 50 millimeter 1.2, so you'll know if it's out of focus.
Yeah. That's awesome. Dang. So tack sharp on the eyes. We actually had a question from Gordon. It's when will the new Z7 be shipping?
Yeah, so the new Z7 II will be shipping early December.
Right. And the Z6?
Yeah, so we announced it
November.
last week, October 14th, and it'll be early December. Z6 II will be early November.
All right.
So just a couple of weeks away.
There you go, Gordon. Cool. Thank you for the question. Cool. So one of the next questions. Oh, yeah. Another thing we wanted to touch up on was the blackout frames, and that's for the Z6 and the Z7 Z7 II, Z6 II. Caught myself.
It's okay. I'm Mark, but these are the Z6 II, Z7 II. Yeah, so that's one of the improvements we've addressed as well. Listen, people are going to be coming from our system from DSLRs, and DSLRs have perfected the blackout time. Very minimal blackout time. I won't go into all the mechanics of the way a mirrorless camera works and how the mechanical shutter release works, but that's one of the things that we tried to minimize is the blackout time. With a sequencing adjustment in continuous high-speed mode, we've been able to reduce that somewhat in both of these cameras. So you'll be able to see the live view a little bit longer until the blackout in both the Z6 II and the Z7 II. Now, this doesn't happen in the continuous extended mode when you get 14 frames per second or 10 frames per second. In those modes, you see live view until the first shot. Every subsequent shot after that, what you're seeing is the previous shot. But when you put it in the continuous high mode, where you're about 5.5 frames per second, there you'll see minimized blackout time, and that's because we've improved on the sequencing of the blackout. I don't want to get too technical, but bottom line is less blackout.
There you go.
More live view.
There you go. That's awesome.
Which actually helps improve marginally the autofocus performance because it's actually viewing the image a little bit longer.
I gotcha. So we actually had another question from Steven Greider. Will the refresh rate from flash be shortened with the new cameras?
Well, the refresh rate of the flash is sort of like determined by the flash.
Yeah.
So the good news about the flash, we'll go down this tangent. So I have a couple of announcements to make with these new cameras about the flash. First of all, the flashes will now work in continuous high-speed extended mode. So where in our first generation cameras, it did not work on that mode, so you couldn't get a fast burst and have the flashes go. Now, you know, if you're synchronized to some powerful flashes that can keep up to that high speed, it will actually fire the flash at the same time as the continuous high extended modes. Number two, we also have announced at the same time as these cameras a brand new wireless radio adapter that you see here. This is the WR, it won't go off my face, but you know what I'm saying. Actually it will. I think it will if I block my eyes. There you go. Look at that. See, I believe in this product. I totally believe in the autofocus of that. Okay, at 1.2, you live by the sword, die by the sword. Okay, listen, this is the WR-R11B, and this plugs into the accessory terminal at the side of the camera, okay? This accessory terminal takes other things like remote controls, wired remote controls, but listen, we're in 2020 now, everything's gotta be wireless. So what this does is through radio, and it's powered through the camera, it can trigger my SB 5,000 flash. Did you see it go out of focus there and then caught focus again? So quick with this autofocusing system. So this is the SB5000, and the distance, the reliability, and shooting through barriers is what we can do now with this elegant, simple, small transceiver.
Compact. Yeah.
Okay. And it's elegant too because you can manipulate all the controls from your camera, Z6 II or Z7 II. You can shoot at farther distances. And you know what? You can also use it. I'll tell you what, some cool things you can do here is if I were a videographer and I put this on video mode right now and I started recording, I don't know if you can see that, but you can use it as a tally light. So it actually shows you if you're recording. Other things you can do is, you know, you shoot weddings. If you're a second shooter, you need a second shooter and you don't actually have a physical person there. I've, in the past, had this on a remote camera, put it on a tripod, and when I shoot from one angle, the other camera triggers at the exact same time. So I did a wedding one time and I shot the groom from one angle, put my tripod on the other. The bride was covered at the exact same angle. All you have to do is get this adapter, plug it into both cameras, and away you go. You have basically a commander remote relationship between cameras, not just flashes.
That's awesome. And if you guys, if you guys want to find out more, you can just scroll down. that transceiver is going to be over there, and so is that vertical grip as well.
Yes, the MV-N11.
Yeah, it's normally those transceivers are huge, and that just goes on top of the flash, so you can't even utilize a separate flash. I think that's great.
That's right. So it doesn't take up the hot shoe here, right? And it doesn't actually have a battery. Some other radio adapters, you'll have to put an extra unit on the flash itself.
Yeah.
And that unit will have a cord and AA batteries that you have to worry about. This is simple. It's elegant. It's out of the way, and it works. So I'm happy that we've updated the original WR 10, but we now have this updated version of it. So it's the WR-R11B. If you're using a D850 or a D5 or any of the 10-pin cameras out there, we also have a WR-R11A version. So if you're looking for the 10-pin version, we have the A version now as well.
Oh, that's awesome. So it'll just work as a transceiver. You could just pop off your flash wirelessly through the command settings.
Same thing
in your camera, just same way. Cool.
Yes. Oh, and one more thing that I'll tell you about this is when you pair it with the flash, it's linked to this flash, but we also have an option in here called pin mode. So imagine this: you're at an event and you set up your flash, maybe it's a 2-flash, 3-flash setup, and you want to shoot with a couple of different cameras. Both cameras can be linked to your flashes by using something called pin mode. So even if you have a second shooter and that shooter wants to trigger your flashes at the same time, you can do it by assigning the same pin to both cameras.
Oh man. That's a great combo, especially if you're just trying to make work more seamlessly as well and not take up so much space in the dance floor. That's cool.
Yeah, and you mentioned Joe McNally. I mean, imagine if you have 10 flashes like a Joe McNally.
I know.
But maybe 5 of them are assigned to one pin, 5 of them are assigned to another. You can go between 2 different looks very quickly just by changing the pin. You don't have to go to each flash and adjust them. So it's a really underrated. Not a lot of people know about this feature, but it's a great feature inside of our radio system to do assigning pin.
Yeah, that's awesome. You just could super flexible that you could do that, especially for events. Cool. We actually had another question from Michael Colbert. Will radio be available on more flashes in the future?
Right now, we have it only available on the SB5000. So SB5000 is our flagship flash. It's our most powerful flash. It's the flash that you would, if you were doing this type of stuff, you would want to use. So at present, it's the SB5000. We have other flashes in our lineup, the SB700, which is infrared only, as well as the SB500. But I will tell you this. You can use infrared and radio at the same time if you wanted to in an array, so long as you actually have an infrared commander unit on top of your camera. So imagine this, you want to trigger your SB5000 off camera via radio, you can do that as long as you have this little adapter. But let's just say in your array, you also have a bunch of SB700s or older SB910s or SB900s. You want to trigger them as part of your exposure as well. How do you talk to them? Well, just put on an optical commander on your camera and you can fire off the optical flashes as well as the radio flashes all in one sequence, or all in one scene.
There you go. Awesome. Well, I got to ask Mark, is there any lens that you are in favor of? Like, what's your favorite lens? What's your favorite combo? Like, I know the 7200 is kind of hard for everyone to get right now, but as soon as we get them in, we ship them out. Is there like a specific lens that you can't get it off the camera?
Well, this is a good segue into talking about why people would get into mirrorless in the first place. Among the differences in terms of the size, the weight, the advantages for video, if you ask me what my motivation to go to mirrorless is, it is the lenses. And one of the reasons I would shoot with a Z6 II or Z7 II versus, say, a D850 is because I want to shoot with a 50mm 1.2. This lens we just announced last month. So we've been coming out with announces like crazy over the last couple of months since the Z5, 14 to 24, 50mm 1.2. But I really love the 50mm 1.2 particularly because I like shooting portraits, number one. Number two, it's a lens that we've never had access to in terms of the aperture ratings and autofocus. So this is the first time that we've been able to shoot 50mm 1.2 with autofocus and with the characteristics that we could only achieve with the Z mount. So if you ask me what my favorite lens is right now, I mean, it only came out a month ago, but it is actually the 50mm 1.2. With the F mount, I used to shoot a lot with the 58mm 1.4 and the 105mm 1.4. Those are the two from the F mount that I would say I couldn't live without. More so probably the 58 because it's small, compact, and gives you the bokeh that it's not been able to reproduce otherwise. It's very three-dimensional. The same goes with the 50mm. There's a level of the bokeh that they've really paid attention to. I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty of the tech, but there's things like background noise in the bokeh that our engineers fine-tune. There is the symmetry of the lens. There's all this type of things. There's the near focusing of the lens too. So for me, I love the 50mm 1.2.
Wow. So you could get like pretty close to like ring shots and stuff like that. For the 51.2, it just sounds like a super versatile.
Okay, listen, we're live right now, right? Okay, this is I'm going to go out of the range of my lights, right? And I'm going to go closer to the camera, and it's going to track me. And then this is the near focusing distance that you can achieve with that lens.
Oh
I mean, I can keep going closer, right? I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
right?
That's amazing.
So this is the 50mm with the versatility that you can get with the 50mm 1.2. I love this lens. I mean, I'm just using. I mean, look at that. It picks me up just like that. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
And let me tell you right now, I'm not even using the Z7 II right now. I'm using the original Z6 to shoot this. Yeah. So the Z6, again, it remains in our lineup. I encourage the viewers to do their research to determine whether or not it's the Z6 II or the Z6 that kind of fits their price point tolerance or their budget or the feature set that they want. But it's a great time because, between $859 with the Z50 all the way up to $3,000. We have, I think, 13 different SKUs available with 6 different cameras. So it's a great amount of choices that we have for our mirrorless system, which only 2 years ago started with 2 bodies and 3 lenses.
Right.
Today, we have 6 bodies, 16 lenses, 2 teleconverters, and namely one of the ones that you mentioned, and I have right here, is 70 to 200, but that fulfills 1/3 of the trinity of 2.8 lenses, and that includes the 24 to 70, as well as the 14 to 24 that we announced last month. So from a professional standpoint, looking at the Nikon system, mirrorless system as a viable professional system, listen, we've listened to your feedback. You wanted the dual card slots. You wanted the vertical battery grip. You needed the trinity of 2.8 lenses without using an adapter. You have all that now in 2020, a mere 2 years after we released the system. So I'm really excited about the lenses, particularly that we're releasing with the system. And I think people now can truly look at this from an event photographer standpoint, a wedding photographer standpoint, as having all the things that they need to get their job done.
Yeah, one of the things I honestly appreciate about Nikon and the lenses that you guys have been manufacturing, on top of getting the legendary, like the 3 essentials, the prime lenses aren't incredibly, like you have the 50-1.8 and then the 50-1.2 and the 85-1.8 as well. They're very compact and really fits that mirrorless portability as well. Like you're taking advantage of that, but now it's like, we're getting the 51.2 and these bigger lenses, and then we're getting the vertical grip. So I feel like the roadmap that you guys designed for this just fit perfectly in terms of what was going to come out. But
yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, you're right about that. I think the roadmap, we've never really done this before, showing what we're going to come out with, but it's important that people gain confidence that this system is rapidly expanding. We have 16 lenses today. We've already announced that we're coming out with 8 more lenses next year in 2021. And just at the same time as this launch, we've revealed 3 more lenses that were coming out in 2022. And that's another 85mm. I'm not going to tell you the aperture, 400 and 600 millimeters. So Nikon is hitting everything from the wide angle to the primes in the middle, the telephoto, the super telephoto, in addition to teleconverters, and we've teased a couple of macro lenses in there as well as a couple of DX format lenses. So we're rounding out the system in a fast way. And in the meantime, don't forget that we also have the Ftz adapter that makes your existing F-mount lenses even better when you bring it over to the Z cameras, because you get the benefit of the in-camera vibration reduction, or IBIS as it's commonly known, that gives you not only 5 stops of VR in some cases, but as well as 5 axis of stabilization if you're using native Z-mount lenses, or 3 axis of stabilization when you're using F-mount lenses. So, I mean, those lenses that I told you about earlier, the 58 millimeter and the 105 millimeter that I swear by on the F-mount, those did not have VR in them.
Yeah.
And if I bring them over to my Z6 II or Z7 II, voila, I can now shoot at slower shutter speeds and maybe lower ISOs because it has IBIS. So that's one of the great reasons to have one of the Z cameras, is because of that IBIS.
Absolutely. And one of my most favorite lenses is the 105 f1 4E. Is that one just makes me feel like I'm holding a medium format camera in a full frame, and then with a mirrorless body as well. I just love the way that image just looks on that kind of lens. But if you guys,
yeah, it's a masterpiece. I tell you, even if you're shooting other brands, just to shoot on that one lens, it would be worth it to get like a D850.
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, it's
just for that one lens alone.
Extremely sharp, insane in the shallow depth of field. But yeah, we actually got a few comments here in chat. Michael Colbert also wanted to say, one reason I went to mirrorless is to cut down on travel weight. I would love to have a 7200 f4. The 2.8 is just more weight than what I would like to carry. Thank you for that comment, Michael. Definitely something worth considering.
Yeah, definitely. I will mention the fact that we still have the 70-200 f4 in the f mount, which
Right.
you can adapt to this. But I understand his concern. I will say that he might be surprised with the weight of the 70-200 2.8. It is lighter than historically than our version 2s and stuff like that with the 70-200. It also has a very close minimum focusing distance. I know that a lot of people tend to look at basically 3 things: the focal length, aperture, and the cost of the lens. But there are some things that this lens offers that I have right now that maybe some people don't know, such as minimum focusing distance is very, very close. Even when especially when you're at 70 millimeters. What other things that I can mention here is these are programmable function buttons right on the lens. As I mentioned before, when you're using it with the Z6 II, Z7 II, you can reverse these focusing rings. It has a control ring that you can use, but I understand that feedback. So we'll see what comes. But definitely look out on our roadmap, because there are other telephoto options in there too, as well as the 24-200, which might be appealing. So the 24-200 is very small, compact, more inexpensive lens. So that might be an option from our existing Z-mount options for telephoto.
Awesome. We got another comment from Steven Grider. Any information on the status of the backlog on the Ftz adapter? I think they're coming in. Yeah, it really depends on the purchaser. Like, that's not something we cover.
Yeah.
But
so
reach out to our customer service and we'll try to find out as soon as we can for you, Steven. Wayne, Wayne also said, can you use the Ftz adapter with a new grip?
Can you use the Ftz adapter with the new grip? Yeah, you can use the Ftz. I mean, it's not really dependent on the grip per se. But one thing I will mention to you guys is that when you get the Z6 II and the Z7 II, be sure to update the firmware for your Ftz adapter. So don't be afraid if you get an error message the first time you load it. If it's still using firmware update 1.0, you should update it to firmware 1.1, and then all will be good in the world if you're using it with the Z6 II or the Z7 II.
Sounds good. And honestly, right now, there's a really good deal if you do pre-order the cameras, the Z6 II and the Z7 II, with the Ftz adapter. That's going to be $200 off, and the adapter is $246. So really, you're getting the adapter for $46. And I think that deal is only going to go on just for a few days. I think until October 26th. I might be wrong. Hopefully it's longer. But definitely something worth considering right now if you're looking into that camera as well, and the Ftz adapter. Cool. Gordon also wanted to say, is there a downside in using my old f-mount lenses with the adapter as opposed to the Z lenses?
Well, I'll tell you this, your F-mount lenses, with the exception of AFD lenses, so autofocus with that's dependent on the camera to drive it, will not have any disadvantages when you bring it over to the Z system. As I mentioned before, it will only gain stability through the IBIS in the camera, which you may not have had in the F mount. Okay, if your lens did not have VR in it, then it simply did not have VR. You bring it over to this system, it'll have VR. However, depending on the lens you have, if it has autofocus, as long as it has silent wave motor autofocus, it will focus through the Ftz adapter. However, if you have an AFD lens, it won't autofocus because that's reliant on the camera having a motor, and the Z cameras do not have a motor built in to drive AFD lenses. So that's one thing that you should research if your lens is AFD or if it's an AFS lens. AFS, AFP, you're all good. If you're AFD, you'll lose autofocus, so you might have to use manual focus. However, the Z cameras do have focus peaking and an electronic viewfinder, so it makes manual focusing a little bit more palatable when you're manual focusing on the Z system.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. And you could kind of tell if it's an AFP with if there's like a little screw divot in that lens, and you'll definitely know for sure that it'll be a lot harder. And they also look kind of like the film lenses. Depending on some of them, but yeah.
But on the whole, I would, if there's a focal length that you're using that is represented in the current Z lineup, I would highly recommend investigating that option, because the native Z mount lenses take advantage of the full width diameter of the mount. So the reason we went to Z cameras, in addition to the other mirrorless advantages of electronic viewfinder and such, is the ability to create brand new lenses that we couldn't achieve on the F mount. So that gives us the ability to have sharper edge-to-edge quality, but also high resolution, even shooting wide open. This is not something that we've had in the past. Typically, you have to stop down the lens a couple of stops to get start getting maximum resolution. With the Z lenses, even the lenses where we launched right at the beginning, the 50, 35, shooting at 1.8 large aperture, you're still getting maximum resolution, which is unheard of in our lineup.
Yeah, just extremely sharp. Like the S-series lenses, just extremely sharp compared to everything before. And I think that really contributes to the no flange and the new engineering that you guys have been doing with the lenses. So it's super exciting with the 51.2, because honestly, 50 is my personal favorite focal length as well. I probably have like 3 different 50 millimeter lenses at home. But the 1.2 and the autofocusing, that was like one of the main reasons why I jumped and upgraded into the cameras that have just incredible autofocusing. It paired with that, and the sharpness of the S line is just going to be pretty. I mean, why not? You know.
Well, Robbie, you mentioned something there, S-line, and a lot of your viewers might not know what you're talking about, because it's been a couple of years now, and we've tried to communicate what S-line is. S-line is the branding of our top of the line lenses for the Z mount. So for those people that are familiar with the Gold Ring series of our F mount lenses, this would be the equivalent of that on the Z line of lenses. However, there's much higher strict regulations to deem something as S-line. So the standards that we set to achieve an S-line badge for these lenses are actually higher than that of the Gold Ring series. So I just want people to know that when they look at our lens lineup, if it's regarded as S-line, that is very high standards, and that's regardless of aperture, guys. So if some of our lenses are f1.8 lenses. I think traditionally people thought of f1.8 lenses as more of maybe a entry level or amateur lens, and they always wanted to get the 1.4s. It's not the case with Z lenses here. It's really geared towards specific pick lenses, and when we deem it with an S-line badge, it's the top quality. And as I said before, we can achieve maximum resolution at wide open apertures, which is why we can create these 1.8 lenses. We have everything from 20, 24, 35, 50, and 85, all in 1.8 prime lenses, more inexpensive than what we would if we had to produce a 1.4 lens, smaller, but maximum performance shooting wide open without any guilt whatsoever, because you're not losing any, crispness of the image.
Right.
So I want people to understand that.
Yeah, honestly, you're probably gonna stop down anime with the chromatic aberration and stuff like that wide open if you were shooting like 51.4 and some of the older lenses. But here, wide open, you're not gonna see any of those issues through that kind of high standard.
That's another game changer. If you could say that about previous film cameras, film lenses, that would be a game changer right there. But this is one of the reasons why we had to change the mount, so that we can accomplish these things in optical design.
Exactly. That's awesome. Let's see. It's cool. I think we're done with questions, but there are a few cool things that are going to be happening here at Unique Photo. There's also the Nikon Z5 rental program that we have right now. So if you actually go to our rental page in our top left, one of those guys over there, in rental, you could rent out the Z5 with, I think, what kind of lenses? 20 to 60, 24 to 60?
Z5, probably the 24 to 50 lens.
There you go.
24 to 50. Yeah.
Right.
So that's a great program. Robbie, I'll just mention to your viewers, because sure. Not the Z50, but the Z5, which we're doing this test drive program on, is very similar in many ways to the Z6. I mean, if you want to appreciate what the autofocus system is like, what the feel and the build quality and the weight and the handling and what the EVF looks like, take the Z5 for a test drive. It's a great program because it gives you the camera for a week. And when you pay that rental fee, if you end up purchasing the camera, it goes towards the purchase of the camera. So it's a great program to test drive. A lot of the things I can tell you in specs, but you'll only truly appreciate when you put the camera in your hands, start shooting with it, and we guarantee. I mean, we'll put our money where our mouth is. We believe you're going to fall in love with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, if you're transitioning from the Nikon DSLRs, going into the mirrorless, it just feels so familiar going into like the mirrorless line, because the numbers or the buttons, the function keys are all there, and it just felt like an easy transition going into it. So definitely something worth looking at if you wanted to rent out the Z5. A 1 day rental, it costs the same as a 1 day rental, but it's a 7 day rental for you to go and try it out. So that's a great deal, and it'll go 100% to your to the purchase of the Z5. So definitely nothing. If you were already considering it, I would highly suggest going there, and it's going to be uniquephoto.com/rental. And you could also scroll down below to see any of the deals, including the Z6 II, Z7 II pre-orders, and the $200 discount with the Ftz adapter, which is like paying $46 for the adapter. I do want to remind you guys again, it's pretty cool. Also, what else we had? We had the vertical grip and the wireless transmitter as well. You can just scroll down and yeah, check it out. Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate you coming here and sharing your knowledge and your experience and expertise with the cameras, and giving us some insight on the Z6 II and the Z7 II.
Hey, my pleasure, Robbie. It's been a lot of fun. So I hope people can look on your website and find out more information about these cool products, because I'm excited.
Yeah, exactly. I can't wait for them to come in the store and we'll get to play with them, because that 51.2, man, as I said, that's like my favorite focal length, and that might be it for me.
I'm going to stop by. I'm going to hunt you down one of these weekends, and I'm going to bring it in for you.
There you go. That's going to be exciting then. All right. Well, thank you again so much, Nikon, for hosting this event, and always having a good time with you guys. And we're just going to end it here. All right, guys. Take care. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe.